Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Fart Fetish Podcast once again. The Fart Fetish Podcast is where we seek to find the answer to what is fart fetish? Where might it come from? How is it enjoyed? And what are the people like who have this fetish and other fetishes too? We do this on every first Friday of the month on almost all major podcast platforms and at fartfetishpodcast.com. We're also now on YouTube, so check us out there and at YouTube Music. You can also enjoy erotic fart stories, captions, and videos at thefartcloset.com and support the podcast at the same time. That's thefartcloset.com. And now I'd like to welcome Drewby to the podcast. Drewby identifies as gay, a furry, a cuckold, and a newly discovered fart fetishist. He's also an erotica writer who enjoys aspects of degradation and humiliation in both his works and his sexual life with his partner. Drewby gives us his perspective on cuckold and shares some of his experiences. He also dives into the origins of these fetishes for himself, and we explore topics like the importance of sexual exploration and keeping grounded in reality versus recognizing what is purely fantasy. We talk about so much in this episode, so come join me right now for the Fart Fetish Podcast. Thanks very much for being here, Drewby Fox. Why don't we start with a little bit about yourself and what fetish looks like for you?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I'm 32. I'm a gay man. I'm a furry and a cuckold, and just within the past couple years, I've gotten into eproctophilia. Um, outside of that, I'm an actor, performer, and for me, what fetish looks like for me, I'd say it's a pretty big part of my life. I'm quite sexually active, or not, depending on how you look at it with the cuckold thing. Um, but it's very important to me. I think fetishes in general are just really important. It's good to explore and find new things that spark your interest and keep things alive and fun. And I shared some of these with my partner, CJ. He's around the same age as me, and yeah, I think that's about it.
When you say you shared these with your partner, you are you saying you found a partner that had similar interest, or you shared your interest with them and it went from there?
I think it could be a little bit of both. I've definitely shared a lot with him, and it's a some things he's really into, some things it might not be his thing. But one thing that I do love about my partner is he definitely indulges in whatever I'm curious about, and he's very open and willing to trying new things and seeing if it's something that he likes, or maybe something where he says, hey, I don't mind doing that for you. It's not quite my thing, but occasionally if you want to try that, I'll do that. So um yeah, and he's definitely rubbed off on me quite a bit with some of his. He's definitely got quite a bit of a smell and musk fetish as well.
Nice. Nice. That's really awesome. I'm glad you have that kind of relationship with each other. Do you know when and like how any of the particular fetishes started for you? When would you say like the first time you noticed some of these I don't know, there's every word is negative, but like alternative or different like sexualities coming out in your expression?
Yeah, for sure. Well, as far as proctophilia goes, I think that one I'm still kind of figuring out, and I believe with all of my top fetishes, I can see where they derived from something in my youth. I know as far as the cuckold thing goes, I first started noticing that with my very first girlfriend in high school. Um, it was like my senior year, and she had cheated on me, and it was a big uh, blow to my self esteem and my pride, It definitely hurt a lot, and I took it to heart very, very heavily. And I remember we had a long conversation about it, and we talked about, okay, like, we're cool now. It was a mistake. Nothing unfaithful is going to happen after this. And then, sure enough, not too much longer, I was getting suspicious, and I ended up looking through her phone, and I found some text messages from another guy, her and him going back and forth, and I remember I saw it, and I there was this weird, like, that butterfly feeling. The jealousy was huge, but then I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her about it at all, and I'm not sure if right away I knew exactly why, but I found myself anytime I had the chance to kind of like sneak into her phone, I would just like check back on those messages and see where they were at, and I wanted to know everything about their side relationship, and I was curious, and I found myself masturbating to the thought of them being together um, constantly, and it was all the time. But the jealousy was still there, and there was still a part of me that was angry about it. But I couldn't stop fantasizing about it, and that was definitely, definitely, I think the roots of it. I think, and I was a very very jealous person. I think when I put so much mental energy into their or her infidelity, I think at some point maybe wires got crossed or something, and then it turned into a fetish. I guess is what I'd say with that.
Interesting. Do you know what, and this may be a hard question, but do you know what attracted you in the first place to want to, like, dig into her phone and stuff and, like, essentially continue, pursuing the jealousy, as it were, in a sense, at least the way I'm reading it. Do you know what drove that? Was it merely the jealousy and then perhaps that got tweaked, or I'm curious about your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was the jealousy that drove that. I know that even after the very first time she cheated on me, and we had that conversation. I know even after that, my trust was definitely broken, and I know I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I couldn't stop thinking of her being with another guy. So it was something where I wasn't seeing it as a fetish at first, for sure. It was more just like I couldn't stop thinking about her doing that, and then me getting angry and jealous, and then that's when I had looked into her phone.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I wonder if it's a like and I'm obviously not a psychologist, but I find it interesting. I wonder if it's a like a protection mechanism for like essentially you can mentally take yourself from and I'm not saying you're unique in this. I'm sure there's many people who have done this as well, but you take your position as essentially, a victim of infidelity and turn it into a way to get pleasure that maybe was lacking, and I'm not saying it's lacking, but perhaps was lacking in the relationship. There's something maybe missing in that relationship, maybe for her, maybe for you, and turning it inward into like I'm this third participant in this relationship perhaps was a way to cope with that situation.
No, definitely, definitely. I think you're probably right on the money there, because like I said, I know that when I had first found out that she was cheating on me, I know it did take a very big mental burden on me, and I think, and it wasn't a good thing. It definitely was. There was some mentally destructive things that I was doing in my own imagination, and I was very hurt. So it does make sense that I guess at some point my brain just said, I'm tired of this. We need to enjoy this and not not beat ourselves up about it. So no, I think you're on the money on that.
Interesting. I'm interested because I think we have more questions in this vein as well later. But I do want to get back to the fart fetish, not just because of the show, like whatever overarching theme, but it interests me too because you said it was relatively new for you. When and about how did you come about that discovery?
Well, I mean, if we're taking it to possibly earlier roots, I know with my family, with a lot of, well, a few people that I've heard even on your show, describe it as when they're young being something that's just funny. I was definitely big Nickelodeon kid. All the guys in my family, we have a big family, a lot of men, a lot of man's man kind of men, and definitely farting was just a common everyday funny thing. Or you could tease your cousins by farting on them or whatever. But we definitely it was always like a super funny thing. and and I remember even as a kid, I was a little bit hyper fixated on how much I enjoyed them as far as thinking that they were funny, but it was never I never saw it as anything sexual, at least at that point. And then I remember uh, in high school, well, a couple things happened in high school. And I know before this we spoke a little bit about it, but there was a video that all my friends were watching, and it was Asian fart porn, and it was just one video that they had found, and it was that two girls, and one of them farted in the other's face, and the girl, she smelled it in, and just seemed like it was refreshing, and she just really enjoyed it. And I remember being very turned off about it at the time, and I don't know if it was just because it was two women, and then the fart was something that was supposed to be enjoyed like it was some kind of bouquet of flowers. That didn't do it for me, but of course, without knowing all the different intricacies of a fetish, that was my only the only thing I had seen from it, so that's just what I thought it was. And then it really wasn't until later, and I was looking up some furry porn, and I came across this image, this piece of art where there was one character and they were bullying another character. They were farting in another character's face, and that had kind of got me a bit. Like there was something about it that I was like, oh, okay, I kind of like that, but in the sense of there's tons of things that you can kind of like, and it doesn't necessarily mean you got a full on fetish of it. But I was in the middle of looking up a bunch of porn and just seeing what else could spark my interest. That thing came up, and I was like, all right, I'll save that image, and didn't really think much about it. And then it wasn't until a couple years ago I came across a piece of furry artwork where it was a cuckold situation, and the bull was farting on the cuckold. And then that's when it just kind of clicked with me, and I was like, okay, okay, I can see that. And then it wasn't too much longer that I was writing one of my own erotica stories, and I kind of got to a moment where I needed the bull to do something really humiliating to my cuckold character. And I was kind of racking my brain, and then it popped in my head that art that I had seen, and I was like, no, yeah, that's definitely I let's try that, and I wrote it down, and then I really got lost in the story, and I just kept writing and writing, and I was like, okay, this is definitely a thing. I'm definitely into this. I I really like this. This is definitely not a one time thing. And then after that, I was like, okay, I can't finish this story without really diving into it. And so I started Googling and looking up the fetish. I started looking up a few forums, and the more porn I saw of the specific kind of porn I was looking for, like more the humiliation, more the like sort of dom sub situations, I was like, yeah, this is definitely it for me.
Nice, nice. That is a. I appreciate you sharing that extent of that journey, because it's true. I think there is surely something to the upbringing you mentioned of at least being around fart and fart humor, because that seems to be a connecting thread in a lot of these stories. Even in my own, where it wasn't a joke, but it was a more just like natural, I guess. It was present in my childhood or what have you. Would you say that, like, how deeply would you say the fetishes all interconnect for you? because I know you mentioned the furry and the cuckoldry together, and I feel like those you mentioned them as a like pretty much they're combined as far as I know, or as far as I've heard. How has the proctophilia element like in the same way become intertwined?
So not not all three interconnected in real life. We haven't been in a situation where um, we could have a cuckold scenario going on where the bull was able to fart on me. That hasn't happened yet. Something we're definitely looking into. In real life, I've been able to my partner's indulged in the fart fetish thing, and I admitted it to him uh, a couple years ago, and he was like, "All right, let's try it, let's do it." And since then, he's definitely been more than accommodating in uh in letting me enjoy that from him. But we haven't brought it to a cuckold scenario just yet. All three combined do exist in my erotica, which I guess I didn't explain much of. My erotica started as a it started as a furry account on Fur Affinity, and I commission artists and they draw artwork, and I will write a story that goes along with that artwork, and that's just kind of something I've been doing on that account. I brought it over to Twitter as well, but once I had finished writing that story that I was talking about earlier, I I had to write a few more. I really had to to get more of that out of my system. And definitely in my stories, I have all three connected. It's definitely a cuckold scenario, obviously furry, because those are the characters and that's the art that pairs with the story. And then my last few stories have definitely had the proctophilia element in it, to quite an extreme sense. My erotica is pretty intense. I definitely go hard on the dom and humiliation aspects. But yeah, in my art, all three have interconnected in real life. Not quite just yet.
No, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. That is the in many ways the hardest part of a lot of these fetishes, regardless of which aspects are included. Because I mean, one, you have the farting aspect that is sometimes affected by bodily chemistry, bodily function, that it can't be delivered on a timely basis necessarily, or it can be but done through unnatural means, whether it be like
Right, right.
using it like an enema tube. I've heard you could use like sugar-free candy, but again, you're hoping and basing your body chemistry will work on these things, and having an awareness of your body obviously will help people who do want to do that. But also, there's only so much you can do as well, and the other elements as well, like furry. I know there's a certain taboo to furry. I mean, the furry community is obviously very vibrant in its own right, but there's also a lot of stigma against the furry. I think that's thankfully changing. But finding someone to bring into your relationship, as it were, to bring all three elements might be difficult.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, we already find it difficult enough just finding a bull. Well, it's easy to find. It's easy to find a guy who, if you get on the apps, you get on Grinder or you get on Scruff, and in the description you put, "We're looking for a guy to have sex with my partner while I watch." That's usually the general description that we'd put, and that's easy to find a guy that way. But a lot of these guys aren't really in it for the fetish. They're just like, "Oh, sweet, I get to have sex," and sure, cool, yeah, somebody's watching. But to find a guy that gets off and who's driven by this power imbalance and taking what's not his, and sort of that role playing aspect, a lot of times we that is just so difficult to find, let alone finding somebody who is a furry who'd be into a proctophilia. Right now, we're really just looking for somebody who's well a bull, but if we can get them interested in the proctophilia thing as well, then I think we're golden in that. I'm okay with keeping my furry stuff online and in my fiction. That's fine. I don't mind that, but I definitely like to get a bull who could indulge us into the proctophilia side of things.
For sure. And just for my own clarification, the bull moniker is someone who's would be into the cuckold, would be more into the cuckoldry, like the actual domination and playing out the essentially the fantasy you want to see in like it's not just someone having sex with your partner. It's how they're treating you, how they're treating them, essentially is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I figured that's what it was. I just wanted to be sure because you that's essentially the nuance you gave me when you were talking about the apps. You were saying like essentially it's not hard to find someone to have sex with your partner necessarily while you watch. I guess it may be similar in the sense of like if you just want a woman to fart, like it's not going to be easy, but it might be easier than finding a woman who will fart and dominate. You know, because
Yeah,
they're completely different skills. I mean, obviously they're different skills, but they're not inherent to each other. Just because you are a farter doesn't mean you know how to dominate, know how to essentially act, as it were, to know how to be someone who can convincingly and excitingly dominate someone. Like again, you can achieve it by I'm sitting on your face and I'm farting and like whoopee. But if there's no talk, there's no like attitude, there's nothing like that sells that feeling of being dominated, then it doesn't matter. I'm sure there's some people who are like, I don't care. It just needs to be physically someone sitting on my face, farting in my face. That's all I care about. My cum will come out. I don't give a fuck. But I think people like you and me, it sounds like, and I'm sure there's many others like us, we actually need that maybe not role playing, but it needs to be sold. The domination has to actually be something that's, I mean, as simply said, mentally or intellectually stimulating.
exactly. Like 100%. Like, and it makes all the difference. And like when you're desperate, you're like, all right, I'll take what I can get. But it does it really honestly makes all the difference. Is really seeing the fantasy played out as realistic as possible. Like you said, it's like someone who can act it out, who can play the part. Yeah, man, it really makes all the difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd like to go back to talk to you about the like domination and humiliation aspects you mentioned because I don't think we've talked to. I mean, we've talked to me. Obviously, I'm a fan of that, but I don't think we've talked to a guest that has mentioned, at least from the submissive perspective, the humiliation domination aspects. So I'm curious, like to start, when did you realize, like, was it well, I'm not going to assume, like, when did you realize it was something you liked, and what do you think you enjoy about it?
I think it was so. I want to say it was my first boyfriend that I had, which that was say my freshman year in college. I had my first boyfriend, and at that point, I had kind of figured out that there was a thing called cuckold. I figured out that was a it was a real thing. People are into it, and I looked into it quite a bit more. Found some porn, mostly straight, because there's very little gay cuckold porn that exists. But I figured it out. I was like, all right, I enjoy this. But it was at that point, I think I was treading lightly, and I enjoyed watching. I liked the idea of just watching. I didn't think too far into it needing to be someone who was humiliating me or anything like that. Um, so with my first boyfriend, I had talked to him quite a bit about it, and um, we had talked about guys that he liked, guys that he found attractive now, or people that we knew that maybe he had a crush on, and then he told me, well, there's this guy, and it was someone we hung out with quite often, and basically when we were doing stuff in bed, just him and I would have him kind of explain to me while we were doing stuff what he liked about the guy, or what he wanted the guy to do to him. And I really enjoyed hearing that, and it was that sort of that jealousy pit of my stomach feeling that I was enjoying. And I guess more and more I'd want him to explain fantasies to me. And he was really getting into it, so it was something he enjoyed as well. But he would come up with scenarios of things that the guy might do to me to humiliate me, and I kind of pushed more for that and more for that, and then eventually um, we had a threesome with his ex, which felt really taboo to me, because it was like, okay, this guy, he was literally in a relationship with this guy, and the first time we did all that, again, we were treading lightly, so it was more of a threesome than a cuckold scenario. But there was one point when I had finished, and I pulled away, and I was just watching them, and what was going through my head was I was seeing it as a not a slap in the face, but here's this guy taking my man, and he's doing it right in front of me, and he knows that I'm here, and he doesn't care. And that's how I was like picturing it in my cuckold brain. uh but I don't know, it just all started to make sense way too quick, that I needed something more than just seeing my partner get fucked. I needed something more than that. I needed that third guy to be in on it. I needed him to be dominant. I needed him to take what was his and to rub that in my face. And I needed it bad. It was definitely a calling for me.
No, absolutely. I can definitely relate in certain aspects. This may be an unfair question because I don't know if I can answer it for myself, but what do you think attracted you to those elements, or wanting that so strongly?
I'm gonna go back to when I was younger. Um, Middle school, high school, I was bullied a bit. I don't think too horribly, but I was bullied enough. Um, Worst thing ever was um, me being put into a trash can by the track team. Uh, but that was like the tip of the iceberg. But I don't know. I think that was another thing that weighed heavily on my mind when I was younger. I was I would sometimes be afraid to go to school or put myself in vulnerable positions because I was afraid of being bullied. Oh my gosh, and I totally forgot to mention this. Uh, so my first girlfriend that I had, we were at a party, and there was a guy that I knew. She had told me before that she found attractive, and she was always really friendly with him. I don't know if she ever did anything with him or not. I'm not sure. But he was at the party, we were all at the party, and there was a point where I was sitting on the couch, and that guy had came over to me, and he like farted right on me, like right at my shoulder level, in front of everyone. Everybody laughed, including my girlfriend, and that was definitely super humiliating moment that I kind of just laughed off. Um, Try to pretend like, oh yeah, we're bros. It's funny, but I was definitely like red face, embarrassed by that. And again, all those things, like I never took as sexual at the time, but I think they all weighed so heavily on my mind that later on, in conjunction with me finding the infidelity thing hot, I don't know, maybe me sinking into that degraded, humiliated sort of specimen, more of those pre-existing things of being bullied and whatnot just piled onto that. maybe.
No, it's interesting. It's very interesting insight. I appreciate your thoughtfulness on that because I mean I wrote it in jest, but like I mean the thing you said about the track and field team, I mean thinking back like at this age, like obviously having it happen to you would be horrible. Obviously you wouldn't feel good about it at the moment, but thinking back it's like that's like kind of a sexy like whatever the start of a sexy porn scenario or what have you, you
Right,
know.
right,
So
exactly.
so it's interesting. I wonder if it's, you know, it's probably, I mean, again, I can't assume or make any diagnosis or whatever, but like I do think that, you know, these maybe seemingly innocuous moments from our past, you know, that is to say not even sexual moments, um can really like make our sexuality in a way that you know you can't even fathom when it's happening. Like obviously these moments are happening to us and we have to process them mentally, and we don't really get necessarily a say in that kind of way. Maybe we do if we're well adjusted, but most people in our, you know, 20s and teens and all these ages, maybe even our 30s for some, myself included, like you're not adjusted enough to adapt to this like out of the norm situation of like having this kind of bully guy fart in your direction and you have to like play it off like, you know, your friends. Like obviously what else are you supposed to do in that moment, but also like what do those mental moments do to us? You never know. And this may be the ways they manifest, the coping mechanisms or the defense mechanisms that come out of these kind of events. Like obviously I'm just talking out of my ass here, but I think there's something to that idea of these moments in our past leading to these fetishes. That seems to be the truth, I guess we're stumbling upon here with the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you talked. I have a question about how do you define cuckoldry for yourself. I think you kind of answered that. Do you have anything more specific, like you'd add, or is there any way you uh, see a cuckold as different in the way that's? Is there a way you do to cuckold that's different than the typical way that you've seen expressed?
Um, I'm not sure. It's hard to say just because the way a lot of people do the cuckold thing is it's pretty broad. I do think a lot of cuckolds lean more towards wanting humiliation and that sort of thing, but it's definitely not always the case. I guess what I'd like to add to it would just be because I mentioned earlier I talked a lot about my my first girlfriend and me going through her phone and whatnot. Yeah, I think over the years, and it's been quite a few years since then, um, just learning and actually finding the community and uh, and in real life experiences, just figuring out how to make the fetish healthy. And I think that's very important because me as someone who is developing the fetish and not knowing what to do with it, I think along the way I made a lot of mistakes and I didn't always go about things the best way. Communication with me and my partners uh, wasn't always the best, and a lot of times I wanted a scenario to, to go somewhat dark. Like I, I think as a cuckold, like when you fantasize, like if you look at my erotica, it goes very far. It goes much further than I'd want it to in real life because it's a fantasy. But, if we're talking about cuckold humiliation and someone coming in and taking your partner, if you go to the extremes of that, you're talking about, they steal your partner away for good. Like your partner decides they don't want to be with you anymore, they want to be with them. That's more fantasy. I wouldn't want that to happen in real life, of course. um, but I think now me and my partner, my current partner I've been with for 10 years. and we've been through the ringer with figuring it out. There's been some arguments here and there, but now the last few years we've been playing around with it. We're we're fully communicative at all times. We're always on the same page. There's a little bit of jealousy here and there, but like it's that manageable kind where I feed off of it instead of tilting the teeter-totter in the wrong direction and the jealousy wins over the pleasure. I'm now fully comfortable in my fetish and how it works for me and for my partner and for whatever bull that we end up finding.
That's great. That is really great, because I do imagine it is a uh, uh I can't think of a good terminology, tightrope to walk in terms of balancing what you say, the jealousy and your sexual enjoyment. I've it's I didn't like I my when my with my ex we did she went on a date with somebody, so it wasn't really cuckoldry, but it was we were playing with that element, and I found I really didn't like it. But for me, it comes from a lot of insecurity. Like I don't think I'm like overly insecure in our relationship, but when you introduce that element, that's basically what you're trying to trigger. You're triggering that insecurity, that jealousy, that feeling of being someone not even like, I think some people look at it cheating especially, they look at it, it's like it's the sex that was the thing. It's like I find, and maybe that is for some, but I find it's more the emotional it's the emotional thing that would be most heartening. Like, if you don't want to have sex with me, that's one thing, but if you don't want to be with me, that's a completely different thing. If you want to spend time with me socially or romantically or whatever, that's really more where I'm like, that's where I care about being infidelity. Like, if you're just hanging around me because you just, I don't know, some obligation, or you pity me or something, like, that's not going to feel good. But I see that I'm getting off topic, but I see that the cuckold aspect is balancing this, and basically playing on that knife's edge of enjoying a small sense of being being that other person in that relationship, which I imagine too, on the opposite side of that coin, when the cuckolding scene, the bull, as it were, has left the situation, the rejuvenation of the connection between the two, regular partners, you two, is perhaps strengthened. Obviously, if both partners are enthusiastic about it, obviously, but like you get to renew the love you have for each other. If I'm mistaken, like, that's the way I see it. Is that the way you feel about it post cuckoldry?
Yeah, no, it 100%. It's definitely been something that has strengthened our bond, like beyond the clouds, like for sure. And I think it's literally letting myself be that insanely vulnerable, and for him too. I mean, like, I know my partner's the one that is getting the sex, but even then, in that situation, you're still vulnerable. And I think us putting ourselves in that situation and lending ourselves over to that feeling, and like you said, after the bull leaves, I can't tell you how many times that has happened, and we're both just giddy as hell afterwards. We're like, oh shit, I can't believe we just did that. That was so cool. I and you were right when you were saying earlier, like, I know there are some cuckolds that literally they don't even go to that sexual part. It's their partner goes on dates with other guys, and you're 100% right. That is what that can cut the deepest. Those are the really, really strong feelings is when it becomes emotional. Um, and those things are fun to play with, but it's all in good conscience, and the communication has to be there with the bull as well. They've got to be on the same page and understanding our boundaries and what we're after. But for sure, when it's all said and done, and it's me and my partner at the end of the day, I mean, it's only something that has brought us closer together.
That's awesome. That is a great thing to hear, because that is obviously not what you assume. That's not what the people hearing that type of relationship would assume is going on. But with most of these assumptions in any of these fetishes or kinks, it's often misplaced and wrong when you don't actually live within that world, or have at least explored that world or talk to people within that world. So I'm hoping this will help people gain an understanding. Which do you like? In my mind, it kind of mixes cuckoldry to me as an element of polyamory, like almost a CNC or consensual non-consent aspect of polyamory. Would you agree with that assessment, or do you have a different assessment?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I've seen it a bit poly before, especially since me and my partner have considered if we had found just the right bull that fits us in every possible way. We have considered bringing on a bull as a permanent part of our relationship, but it would in the sense of where I guess I would see. I mean, I guess poly can have its own many different colors and flavors, and each relationship can be unique in their own sense. Ours wouldn't be. I wouldn't want or expect the bull to have strong loving feelings for my partner. That's not something we're looking for. It would be more of a he he comes in and helps us out because he's giving my partner what I can't give. So he's kind of in this sexual relationship with no strings attached, and me and my partner are in the loving part of the relationship. So in a way, yes. I mean, especially if we're considering it being something more long term. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting. It's interesting exploration for sure. Like, it's so much of this stuff has not, at least in my exploration, has not been talked about or like studied. That it's almost like uncovering new ground as we go, in trying to um, not find a monolith, but at least explore the idea is much more than just a term and a definition. That's really the um, overarching goal of this show, and why I'm happy to actually branch out beyond the fart fetish too, because as much as I do want to help and normalize the fart fetish, I'd love to help and normalize similar and fetishes that are in the periphery, and they're interesting to me as well to hear about how people um, go about interesting and different sexualities, and I get to learn. There's some aspects that I enjoy as well. Like, I've talked about feet on a number of episodes, and I don't think the show made me realize I liked feet, but in going to do domination, I had feet put in my face, and I'm enjoying them pretty readily in that situation. So, um, obviously there are aspects that I think you said it yourself at the beginning of the show, that this exploration of our sexuality, this opening of ourselves and seeing what we might like and what we might want to try, and also knowing what we don't want to try and what might be something we don't want to explore, but really having that openness to seeing the possibilities. I think is really, you said important, and I think it's true. It's super important that people kind of explore that element of them, because I don't know, I find life pretty boring otherwise. Not just sex, like finance, business, money. Like, there's not a lot. Like, once you start like obviously you can study all these topics for your whole life, but there's not a lot of like, it's not like we're inventing new like portal technologies and now it's gonna like, everything is kind of like, it's either a business, you work for somebody,
Yeah.
or you have a job. Yeah, you have a job, you work for somebody, or you sell a product, you like own stock. That's pretty much the only ways to make money or do anything. It's like life is kind of at least as far as the human confines, life is kind of dull. So if you can explore furry or cuckold or different sexualities in general, I think that's kind of the only exploration we humans have. And again, it's not just sexual, but it's one of the only areas where we can actually do something a little different, do something that's not that hasn't we haven't tread that ground yet necessarily. And obviously some people have, but I don't know, it's just an interesting, I find life to be pretty boring without it, I would say.
No, totally, totally.
And you said the farting aspect has been largely fantasy, but you have done it a few times with your partner. How has those, like, I guess describe to me how those went, or how at least one of those more memorable situations went the first time maybe.
Yeah, sure. So I guess first it was me, the night that I was like, ah, yeah, okay, yeah, this is it. This is something I'm into. Put it on the list, and I was like, okay, got to tell him. And I remember being really bashful about it because I was just like, I feel like I'm always telling him like, oh, I'm into the weird thing, but I'm like, we got to stop being in that mindset. This is these are all fun things to do. So I was, I told him, and he was like, all right, yeah, let's try that sometime. And it was, I remember we were on a vacation, we were both a bit drunk, and I was just like, hey, can we try the thing? And he was like, yeah, sure. And it was definitely one of those, we didn't really know what we were doing. It was just trying to figure it out, and it kind of ended up being like a um sort of like the unnatural method. I ended up blowing air into him to make it happen. Um which, doing more research on it, wasn't quite too sure how safe that was, but um did that, and it was definitely a check mark. Okay, yep, cool, like that, really enjoy that, that's fun. um and I remember after that, we finished doing that, and he asked me, well, how'd you like it? And I was like, yep, that was amazing, that was one of the coolest things I've ever done. And he was like, cool, he's like, yeah, I don't mind doing that for you, you can do that anytime. um which, that's how he said it, so I don't know how super into it he is, but his exact words were, I don't mind doing that. So yeah, whenever I get the chance, I kind of, I ask if it's something he doesn't mind doing, and he's always willing. So
For sure. Do you usually do it in a domination context, or is it more just like just hanging out, just casual, or what? What kind of aspect or theme would you put on it?
more casual so far with us. I have asked him to kind of be more rude about it. I've even asked him, hey, it doesn't even have to be, if we're just alone together, in the apartment, and you just, want to grab the back of my head and put me right there, and go for it. I was like, please, please. I just, I want to try it from that angle, and he's done that a few times. Definitely enjoyed that. And I definitely can say, when the more forced and bully humiliation side comes out, I'm definitely way more into it, uh, for sure. But it's still all so new to me. So even in the casual sense, like, I'm loving it. I'm loving life.
Nice, nice. That's really awesome. That's really great. Do you find having this mindset for
domination and humiliation? Do you feel it makes life or connection or romantic connection more difficult? And it probably is a little different because you do have a partner of a long time, and obviously an understanding and loving partner, which is amazing. It's that, obviously congrats to you. That is a great, I'm so glad to hear that. Do you find though it makes anything, whether it be in your relationship or outside of your relationship, more difficult?
Definitely in the beginning. I know I mentioned that a bit before. Definitely while I was working out the kinks and figuring out the fetish, and anything humiliation related, it was a rocky road. Now I don't feel like it really affects me otherwise in and out of relationship. Well, okay, I'll say this. We have been pretty open with the fact that we are in a cuckold relationship. Not 100% open, but anybody that we're close friends with, we've been completely open about. And we do make close friends quite often because as performers, you're with a new group every 6 months. So word has gotten around, of course, and we definitely find other people we've worked with, other guys coming to us thinking that we're automatically going to be interested in having a threesome with them. One thing is clearly they don't quite understand the fetish, but most of the performers that we personally work with aren't quite our type. Our company is hiring quite a few slender dancers for the most part, and my partner is particularly into more beefy, thicker, bigger guys. So we found that to be a little awkward from time to time. A lot of guys who know about that, they're trying to wiggle on in, but I mean, as far as outside the bedroom, my professional life, my my casual life with friends and with colleagues, I feel like I carry myself with a lot of confidence. I'm very trusted in the company that I work for. And I don't just perform. I have sort of a leadership role where I do quite a bit of administrative stuff as well. So a lot of people look up to me, and so it's quite different than how I see myself in the bedroom. I definitely like to be like torn down and brought off the totem pole and like face in the dirt. But outside of that, no one would really quite know any of that, and I like it that way. I definitely prefer it that way. But no, I don't see I don't see it hurting my life in any way whatsoever.
That's great. That's great. How do you find the response of people outside? Well, first of all, are these people like in kink or in that kind of any kind of periphery of this kind of understanding? And then if not, or if so, I guess, what has been their response to hearing about the cuckold relationship you have?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on. We've definitely talked to some of our closer friends and some who are more into the kink thing, some who are not, and it's completely various. Someone who is into kink, who doesn't know anything about cuckold, they're still sometimes blown away when I really get into the deep recesses of how it works. Sometimes they're blown away, whereas someone who isn't quite as spicy in the bedroom, we've told them, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. That's cool." Um, so yeah, I don't know.
For sure. No, I'm just curious because it was the way you were talking about production. I was wondering if it was like vanilla productions or you were working in adult productions, where that may be, obviously people in adult productions may be closer to, even if they're not in kink, maybe have more understanding of different types of sexualities.
Right, for sure. No. This is definitely vanilla.
Gotcha.
Vanilla
Okay.
performing. We're not
Okay.
doing the topless Vegas shows or
You said
anything
dancers, so like this was going to be some pretty
Yeah, that's
classy
true.
porn. Like
No. I definitely didn't elaborate.
we have a whole
well enough
musical
on that.
number. Like it's great.
I mean, yeah, I mean, things get a little risque, but that's as far as it goes. But you'd be surprised. I mean, the performers that I work with, they're they're all they're all a big bag of hornballs for sure. Everybody's got a little something going on
For
for
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, the reaction definitely has varied from person to person, and we're kind of careful about who we tell. The cuckold thing, I honestly at this point in my life, I don't really care anymore, and I love that I've finally come to that point. I love that because I hit it within an inch of my life, like for most of my years. It's something that like I never wanted anybody to know about, and now we're really open about it, and we just don't care, and that kind of feels good. And with the people that we've told, they really respect that we just don't give a shit, or at least that's how they see it. But so sorry that I've taken up so much of this time
Not at
talking
all.
about
This is
the
your time.
cuckold thing, but going back to proctophilia, and it's still, like I said, it's still very new to us. But I know, like, after the first session that I had with my partner, where we played around with it, the first thing he told me was, maybe this isn't something we tell people. And I knew exactly what he meant by that, because we're so open with everything about us. um and at the time I was like, yeah, of course, this isn't, nobody's going to understand this. uh and to be honest, I feel like I'm still at that place. And a lot of times, when I really think about it, I kind of feel like slapping myself on the wrist and being like, you're not living up to your motto. And but I don't know, it definitely just feels like something where, especially as a leader in my company, I feel like if it got out and it got to some of the people above me, and with our positions being more high profile, like, performing for these we perform for audiences that will have the same audiences for an entire week, and people will get to know you, and they'll want to come back and see you specifically, that kind of thing, where they have performers in that kind of spotlight. I don't know what the reaction would be, and legally I don't know if they could even do anything. If my name and my company was not put on the same thing for everyone to see. But I don't know. I don't know if something like a fart fetish, if they learned that that was a thing, if they found my furry erotica, what the consequences would be of that. And I know a lot of my leaders who cast me to be in the next thing, uh, would that's casting is a very subjective thing. So even just them knowing that about me and being disgusted by it, would they then not cast me in the next project? It's definitely a fear of mine.
No, for sure. That I definitely get. But I can't imagine, like, if people know, like, about the cuckold aspect. I imagine that is a similar level of and this is not me encouraging you, but I'm just saying, like, I imagine it's a similar level of potential to view your stat. Is that, am I correct in that? Is, like, the fetish itself is what would potentially change your status or hireability or what have you in among the group, and perhaps among the audiences even. But you feel the cuckold fetish is more acceptable than the proctophilia? And I'm just curious. I'm not, like, accusing or trying to make a judgment.
No, for sure. Well, first off, I think at the end of the day, like, if somebody had found out through word of mouth that I was into farts, I think that would be more of a, like, turn the head, ignore it. I think they'd be like, ah, too much information. I don't want to know about that, from whoever was telling them that, versus let's say somebody finding my Fur Affinity account and bringing that to the supervisor. I think if it was a online, here it is in black and white, he writes these stories that are disgusting and I mean, to their eyes, I'm, imagining them saying like, oh, this is disgusting and twisted and, you know, whatever. I think I think is what I would fear most. But as far as like a proctophilia versus the cuckold thing, I guess maybe the way I see it in my mind is with the cuckold thing. Yes, we're playing around with the couple dynamic, and we're bringing in someone, and people might see that as cheating or whatever. But I guess still at the end of the day, it's humans having having sex.
Sure.
They're having sex as opposed to a proctophilia. Now we're reaching into someone's farting on someone else. And not saying that like I personally don't see a bad or good scale on this or which one's worse. I guess it's just me taking myself out of my own perspective and imagining how someone else will see it. And maybe it's that I've been involved with the cuckold thing for way more years, and that might also happen to me with a proctophilia down the line.
Perhaps, but I don't think you're wrong. Actually, you brought up a good point there with the idea, or at least I maybe connected the dots in my own head. Because when you said I forget what it is, but basically the idea is, I think people hear cuckold and they do what they assume, they think what people have come to you is like, oh, they like threesomes. And whereas you hear fart fetish, you're like, oh, this guy likes shit. Like they go to the extreme
Right.
of what. And I'm not saying like that's the immediate assumption. Like some people probably don't think like that. If they saw two girls, one cup, they probably do. But
Yeah.
the point is like, I think people will jump. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
cuckold. They just like sex. They're sex fiends or whatever the assumption they
Yeah.
want to make. Whereas you hear fart fetish is like, oh, this person likes being pissed on and all this other weird stuff. So yeah, I guess I do see where the like the societal might be like, yay, sex, but boo, bodily functions. Like it I get it. Um, I forget. I think I talked to Dill or whatever. It's like the even the sexual fluid. It's like me and he mentioned like not like it's gross. It's like sex is kind of gross in a way.
Yeah.
But people don't think about that. They'll just think like, oh, shit and poo and pee are gross. But the cum sexual fluid is not gross. That's fine. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah. Exactly.
You can eat that if you want. That's okay. Like uh you mentioned you started writing erotica. I think you said about 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. What inspired you to want to start writing?
Well, I've definitely always been a creative writer for sure, and I think even like before 2 years ago, I had written stories here and there, just kind of for fun, just because I was like, I'm a very imaginative masturbator. Like I oftentimes I'll start out with porn and then I'll leave the porn just to get back into the own story that I'm telling in my head, because I feel like I always need something very specific that I'm into. Um, and so yeah, I've just always been a strong writer, and then I think I was literally just writing a story for myself one day, and I was like, I feel like I'm really good at this, and I feel like if I put this out there, there's gonna be a group of people that are into this, and it's specific. It's cuckoldry, but it's I do add quite a bit of a twisted element to it. It's very intense. It's um very degrading. Uh, but I was like, I know there's gonna be people into this, and sure enough, I do have a little bit of a following. But once I posted my first story, I was very excited about it, and then just even the first few comments of some people who it sounded like that was exactly what they'd been waiting for, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like I'm I'm giving someone something that they weren't able to get previously, and now I really feel it with adding the proctophilia into my stories. It's there's been a few. I've lost a couple people, just a couple people who are like, nope, nope, can't do it. Don't even want to play with the other stories now. But I think I do a good job of putting in the warning right before the story. So I'm like, hey, just so you know, this story before you read it does include a fart element. If that's not your bag, don't go into this. But yeah, I really really enjoy it, and I think for the most part I just crave seeing how people respond to it, and the recent stories that I posted, the people who are really into it, the, verbatim they'll tell me that they can't find anything like it anywhere, and of course because I've now mixed furry in with a cuckold fetish, and it's now almost canon at this point because all my stories revolve around the same three characters. So I've got people following this, and now if they're into the proctophilia thing, then boom, they've now got something ultra specific that they could only play out in their imagination, and now here it is, an artist created work that goes along with the story, and they can enjoy that fantasy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Something you mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure you said in relation to your stories, is you write um, you write a fantasy more than what you'd like to happen in real life, essentially. Can you talk about how you keep yourself grounded in that reality versus fantasy mentality? Like when going out in the real world or meeting people, how do you, and especially in relation to your what you're seeking in your relationship with your partner, what how do you keep yourself grounded? I guess is a simpler way to ask that question.
I think keeping ourselves grounded maybe just kind of comes naturally, just because of course when I'm writing out these fantasies, I'm either very very horny, so I'm just kind of like going on sex brain at that point, and then I'll revise later when I'm not horny at all, see how it reads, and kind of go back and forth from that. But in real life, I guess we've only had one bull who was long-ish term, and we had them for like 2.5-ish months. So we've only had a certain amount of time to kind of get to know a bull, and I have a feeling that if we find a bull that we end up being a little bit more long term with, the experiments and the pushing the boundaries would definitely happen more. And I guess that's still something that maybe I'll end up figuring out more later on down the line. Maybe there'll be another conversation to be had, maybe some feelings or an emotional chord will be struck, and all of a sudden I'll be reconsidering how I view the fantasy at that point, or maybe it'll be something to get used to.
The only reason I ask is because where the problem starts to come in is when people are left really to their own devices, left to essentially only fantasize and are not connecting with women. And I have this problem as well. And I think what gives you an advantage in this case is you have a long running relationship. Like in my fantasy ideal world, I would be like chosen by a woman. Like I'm a submissive person. Why would I like walk up to a woman and say like, "Hey, I think you're attractive. Like, do you want to like? I'd like to get to know you more," or whatever. Like whatever you say to like talk to or start talking to a new person, in the wild, out in the world. In my world, I would just be like, picked, essentially. And there's an appeal to that as well. But that's not the world we live in. So I think when people don't have people to connect to, whether they be friends of the opposite sex or romantic partners, I think they are, especially if they are creative, they're stuck to just fantasize. And I think that it's good to have that expression, but also it can find a way to
leak into what you think reality is. And I think, growing up on Tumblr and various fart forums or whatever, you get a sense of domination and other type of content where, like, I was scared to even go to a BDSM dungeon, like, for a session, because I'm like, are they gonna let me out? Are they gonna, like, whatever? It's like you get there and it's like, no, it's a fucking business. They don't want you longer than you're paying for. Like, once your money is up, get the fuck out of there. They're not going to hold you. You're not a prisoner. Like, it's a business just like any other. So, but when you look at Tumblr and you look at videos and you see the fantasy being played out and you don't, like, connect, it's like, oh, they're acting or whatever. Like, even if they enjoy it, they're still acting as a victim, as it were, in these videos. But if you don't have anything to compare it to, if you're not having experiences of your own, you can get trapped. So I was curious if you had difficulties, but I think it seems like you connect with people seemingly readily, at least in the way I'm talking to you now. It seems like you have pretty good connections with people you meet.
Well, I guess since you've elaborated, no, I do find at times, like, because I'll if I'm really, like, stuck in a story for, like, a couple weeks, I think I definitely can notice it starting to affect, I guess, real life judgment. And I think I personally think I'd be nervous just with how I've even written my bull character, and then some other erotica, some cuckold erotica that I've looked up. I think given a bull who has been in the community and has been very experienced, I think meeting them in real life, like, if they really know what they're doing and they have that dom personality, I think it might intimidate me and scare me at first, not being sure, like, how far they'll go, or if they'll care about the limits, if they'll jump straight over the line of what's okay and what's not, just because of like the character that I've created over the past couple years. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I did not think about that type of scenario, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense that you bringing someone new into the relationship, especially, new to the paradigm, new to the act, they may not know exactly what to do. They may go too far, and that may be more accidental, but they may not. They may do it purposefully or have a more sinister intention. Obviously, that's probably the fantasy creative brain working. That they're probably more going to just be nervous and, like, what have you. I'm not sure
Right.
what your experience has been, but, like, I imagine people going in that situation are just like, what do you want me to do? What's okay? Like, where are the parameters?
Or it could even go the opposite direction, and maybe I get carried away and I want things to go further, further than maybe they should. I don't know. I know the one bull that we have had, that was the 2 months and a half ish that we had him. He didn't really know too much about the fetish when we first got with him, and it was funny because we actually kind of set him up in a way. My partner was really attracted to him, so we were like, okay, well, let's let's hang out with him, see how we vibe with him. And we had hung out with him a few times after work, and we ended up inviting him back to our place to, like, play video games. And and sure enough, one thing led to another, and we had a quote unquote threesome. But my partner and I had planned, okay, we'll just try this out because we've always wanted to. He's clearly more into you anyway, so let's let's start it out as a threesome, and then maybe, like, you can just be more into him and see if we can get me kind of, like, left out, and see if it just naturally happens. And it did, which was really cool. And he enjoyed it at the end of it, and we kind of spilled the beans afterwards, like, hey, like, sorry, like, we're a cuckold couple. I hope that's not, like, weird or anything. And he was really chill about it. And then week after week, he kind of started playing with it a little bit more, and then we noticed he was getting really into it, and he actually really did enjoy having that power. And he kind of, there were a couple times that he went a little bit over the line for us, not too bad, but we could see him sort of discovering that power and kind of taking advantage of it.
Yeah, no, I imagine it is something that has to be done with care and respect. So it's true. Like I'm glad. I'm assuming like that person is no longer performing is not the right word, but like playing with you guys, I guess would be a better word.
No, he's not, and not for those reasons. Like we had the conversation afterwards, and he was cool about it. I was mainly just saying it for I can see where that role can go to people's heads just as much as it goes to my head in a different way, in a different part of the role. But no, we're no longer with him anymore because with the place that we work at, he had moved to where we work at, and then he got fired. So um, we would have kept going on with him, but cards didn't play out that way. So
I see. Can you talk more about your connection to like furry and why you think that came about? Like you mentioned to me in our chats about watching cartoons and playing as an animal as a kid, but I mean I expect these are pretty common. I imagine I did I mean I watched cartoons obviously. I don't know how much animal play I did, but I'm assuming maybe. But what do you think made that furry interest stick around for you beyond that, time of your life?
I think it was like when you're a kid, you play house or whatever, and I always had to be the pet. That was always like a role that I wanted to be. I always wanted to be the animal. I always wanted to be the fox. And and then of course you get to an age where that's not cool anymore. You don't play house at recess. That's not cool. That's not what guys do. But then I got to college. I'm in this very freeing environment away from my small like little conservative town, and I'm seeing all these people from different walks of life. And at this point I had been told all my life that if you're gay you're going to hell, that kind of thing. And then here all of a sudden are several flamboyant men just openly being themselves all over campus. And I'm in this environment of opening myself up to all these new possibilities of restrictions that I've had my whole life. You can't be this way, you can't be this way. And and I was just online randomly one day, and I don't remember how it popped up, but I found that there was a furry community. I did not know had existed before then. And I found it, and it was just like immediate. I was like, I can get into that. These are my type of people. And sure enough, not too long after that, I went to my first furry convention, and that was that. I was like, I love this. And not even on a sexual level. The non-sexual side of the furry community is is a blast. I mean, these people are so creative. And I've made my own fursuit. I have my own character. I take him to conventions, and it's just a good time. It's like being dropped into a Disney movie, and all the panels and everything are really fun. And then of course I definitely love the furry art, for furry pornography end of it as well. That I found almost exactly in tandem with when I found the furry community in general. And ever since then, I mean, that's a good portion of the pornography that I look up as furry.
Nice. Nice. What help me get a sense of it if you can. Like I don't I again, these are not philosophical, but like I don't know. Let's say philosophical. These are philosophical questions. What's different for you and how or how do you feel different like as a furry? Or is it a community thing or what is it about that element that you enjoy?
I guess I would say community, but even then, it's been difficult for me to really make strides in the community, or make a name for myself. I've started to a little bit, but it's just hard for me to get to conventions. It's hard for me to get to meets, or to kind of network, just because of my particular job. I'm unavailable for very large portions of the year. Um, and that's been tough. Like I definitely I've definitely always wanted a bigger part of the community, but it's just difficult. Um, and for me, I'm 1000% open about being a furry to everyone. I typically wear a tail when I'm out casually. I don't wear one to work, but when I'm out casually, I often wear a tail that I'll replace every so often once it kind of starts to fade a little bit. So I mean, it's definitely like kind of like always a part of my life. It's hard to explain to people because I think a lot of people, like if you said like how does it make you feel different, I think a lot of people assume like, oh, like you always identify or feel as if you're in embodying this animal, whatever your furry persona is, your persona. um and I think from time to time I kind of feel that way, like I feel like maybe I'm expressing myself or gesticulating with my hands in a way that I imagine possibly my furry alter ego would. So I guess maybe that's just part of the lifestyle thing about it. But other than that, I mainly see it as a hobby. But I guess since it is a part of my almost everyday life, I'd probably see it more as a lifestyle.
Nice. Getting back to the farting element. Do you recall any of the shows or what have you that were like part of your upbringing? You said Nickelodeon, but like, do you remember any of the shows that stood out to you?
Oh well, well actually, I'll specifically go with the Scooby Doo movie, the first live action one. There's a scene where where Shaggy and Scooby have this like belching farting competition. And I remember once I got the DVD of that, because I remember I saw it in theaters and I remember thinking, oh, I can't wait for this to come out on DVD so I can rewind that part over and over. And that's exactly what I did. I got that DVD and I rewound that part over and over. And I don't know, maybe even then there was something a little bit more than just like, oh, this is so funny, because I intentionally locked my door and turned down the volume so that way I could rewatch that part over and over and over. So me intentionally hiding that from like any of my family's ears hearing it, or hearing that I am watching this part over and over. Maybe that was a sign. Maybe I kind of subconsciously knew then. I don't know.
For sure, for sure. I hear that. I hear that. I remember. I mean, obviously Nickelodeon had a lot of fart jokes. Rocco's Modern Life was basically, I was gonna say one large fart joke, but it was
Oh, absolutely.
every cutaway was essentially like a fart joke because they all had like slack jawed like looks to them, and then they did that fart sound that they always did.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Specifically, I remember there was an episode of Angry Beavers where I think one of them accidentally farted on the other, and the whole episode was about the other one eventually getting revenge for that.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that helped ignite the, like, I was into domination obviously before that, but yeah, that really, I think, solidified the idea of like farting and domination, because that was one episode where it actually was basically there. It was basically in that episode, in black and white, obviously not sexual, but in its own right could definitely be sexual on a juvenile level of being like having someone essentially hold someone over you, and essentially it being a fart, and as it were, eventually coming, and that was the end, that was the conclusion of the episode. Eventually he got farted on,
Yeah.
so it was almost, that was the climax, as it were, if you want to look at it sexually, this whatever juvenile show. But yeah, it's never not surprised me how much farting was in early media, especially in the 90s and maybe early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think another one that I remember was I don't know if you know the movie Corky Romano with Chris Kattan. And there's a moment when he's in the street and there's these two other guys, and he's pretending to be an FBI agent and he's trying to act like big and bad. So he has them like lean over, and then he turns around and then he bends over like he's going to fart in their face, and he ends up having a hard time producing a fart, but which is the comedy of it. But I even remember like watching that, like just seeing the compromising position in there in the middle of the street in front of everybody. I don't know. There was definitely like a part of that that caught my attention quite a bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would you say you I mean, you've laid out and in great detail, which I appreciate, a few fetishes here. Would you say you enjoy having each of them? And what do you feel about them, like on a more broad basis?
I I love every single one of them. Um, and those are definitely the top three for me is furry, cuckold, and proctophilia. Those are definitely the top three for me. And I don't know, like I don't know how to say it. I don't know if saying that I hold them close to my heart. Maybe that's a little melodramatic, but I don't know. Like I find my fetishes very comforting to me. Like I enjoy that I have something that I know really works for me and pushes me sometimes out of my comfort zone, but I like that. I I find them very very almost like that they're a part of what has built my personality. Like they are a part of me, not just something that I jerk off to, but it feels like something that is a part of me. And I guess I feel very passionate about them. And I know when I write about these fetishes, whether it's in the actual fictional story itself or when I've written some offside analysis of someone else's work or my own, I talk about it very passionately. And it's helped me as well look into many other fetishes. I like to learn about fetishes that aren't my fetish. Just I've opened myself up to that. At this point, I'm like, well, if I'm going to be interested in cuckolding, if I'm going to be interested in having someone fart in my face, really, there's very few things that are off limits, aside from like for real, actual non-consent and somebody severing their own head. There's really not a lot that's off the table for me. But I love finding what makes everyone tick, and it's encouraged me to do so. It's encouraged me to do that research, and really the more research that I feel like I've done, the more all of it just doesn't seem like as big of a deal as the whole world has made it. Like just the fact that we even still say taboo for things that just don't fucking matter, still blows my mind. Like, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, definitely. I 100% understand what you're saying, and it is great that to have that that freedom of expression, and to learn and to want to learn about other fetishes. Even not even fetishes, to want to learn in general, I guess, is something that is surprisingly not encouraged as much, or not maybe appreciated as much as it were. I think people talk a big game about wanting to be lifelong learners or whatever. I think few people actually do it because it's hard. Who wants to learn their whole life? It's obviously there's an interest to it, but it's also work. Like if you just want to sit and watch TV and do nothing, then learning is hard. Then there's no reason. But if you have a quest for knowledge, if you want to know more about the what humans do and how they act and how they react and how they want to express themselves, I think there's nothing better than trying to dive in, and especially into sexuality, because it's sometimes maybe one of the most pure forms, because I guess oftentimes it's done between the I mean oftentimes it's done between terrible partners, but it's done oftentimes between the best of partners that are I don't know, working towards a mutual feeling of enjoyment that I think society spends a lot of time chasing those out of us. Like I had There's a stupid comment I'm going to make, but there was a TikTok video of someone sent to me about a daughter making fun of her or ignoring her parents because her dad has a bad laugh. It was almost like a Patrick from SpongeBob type laugh. And sure, that's certainly funny. Like obviously, I'm sure I laughed at it when I looked at it as well. But then I thought about it, and I don't want to get like too dramatic or whatever, but to make fun of someone's laugh, that's like it's laughter is one of the purest expressions of joy that society actually allows us to have publicly. Like privately, I think we're open to many things, but publicly, like to make someone self-conscious about their laugh is, I think, one of the most destructive things you can do to a person, because you're quashing that joy, that free expression of the, and making them like think about, oh, I better not laugh because people will make fun of me, because I don't get to, my laugh is dumb or my laugh is stupid. And that's
Wow.
really, I mean, it's a stupid thing. Like I'm sure people make fun of laughs all the time. People have silly laughs. I'm sure I have a dumb laugh. It doesn't matter. But I thought about it and I'm like, that's really, it really can be deep about like the simplicity of like how people can affect other people is not necessarily thought about. And I think it's maybe an extension of what you're saying is like the desire to learn and the desire to understand people, I think is well, it's empathy for one thing, but it's also just it leads to a much happier and fulfilled life for the time that we have, the time that we have to enjoy. We can find the humans among the people, as it were. I like to put it anyways.
I like that. I like that.
Do you have any thoughts about the future? I mean, you have a few fetishes. Do you have any thoughts about what the future might be for proctophilia, for cuckoldry, for furry? Like, I mean, furry already, in my opinion, seems like it has a explosive growth and will continue, no doubt. I mean, you got conventions, you have so many things. The art is explosive. There's so many great artists in the furry community. So many artists in general in the furry community. What do you think about any of these fetishes and the future of them? And maybe even just for yourself, if nothing else.
You're completely correct, I think, about the furry community, and with anything, I think there's still some ways to go. But it has been, I mean, being a furry for the past 12 years, I've been able to see the growth, and it's even just in people's general knowledge. Like in the beginning, most people, you said furry and nobody even knew what you were talking about. Now if you then it went to like, then if you said furry, people would be like, oh, those are the people that have sex in animal costumes. And now I find that even general people who've never met a furry, some of them even have like the knowledge, oh yeah, I there are people who dress up in animal costumes, and there's a misconception that they all have like sex, but they really don't. And that's still not true, but it's better than what it was. For sure. I see I see the future of fetishes in general opening up a lot more, and I think it's going to happen. I have a feeling that it's going to happen quick. I think at some point it's going to skyrocket. There's going to be a conversation because, even not to bring it to this, but just to see all these individual civil rights movements like happen one after the next. And it seems like it follows the same annoying formula of all these like hoops and hurdles that these groups have to go through. But I could be incorrect in saying this, but I feel like those those moments are getting faster and faster. The next thing that happens where everybody's learning about it and they've got to figure it out and they've got to, you know, come to term with it and understand that there are other people in the world besides them. I feel like that journey is getting a little bit faster for people, and at some point I think there's going to be a larger, more broad discussion about fetishes, and just that simple mentality of, don't yuck someone else's yum, don't kink shame, even to the fetishes that you find hilarious or disgusting. sorry, it's not for you to say what's right and wrong. And I don't know, I would like to see more exposure of certain fetishes in media. But furry, for example, I've seen it. I've seen it brought into a couple things now. I've seen an American Dad episode where they made the furry joke. I've seen this episode, and whether it's, we see it as like, oh, that's not super accurate or whatnot. I've seen ones where it could be damning to the furry community. It was the CSI episode where they went to a furry convention and there's a strip club in there. I've never seen a strip club in a furry convention. Not that I wouldn't mind if there was one, but I would like to see that with some other things. And it's always going to start out with comedy, and what I hope is that if it starts out in comedy, it's making light of something as opposed to just damning it and turning it into something that should be frowned upon. But I don't see the harm in a movie or a TV show taking a cuckold relationship seriously. I don't see the harm in that. And it's a niche community, but it's way bigger than people realize. And I mean, from what I'm coming to find out, same with the fart fetish community. These are communities that have way bigger numbers than people realize, and they're real people. They're real people, and our art and our media is supposed to represent reality. So, I feel like there's stories that people are being afraid to tell, and I think that's where it's going to start is with media. Most likely a joke in some comedy here and there. That's usually where stuff starts, unfortunately, and then hopefully it gets dove into a little bit more.
For sure. For sure. It's funny, like I was thinking about, because I was thinking like it's weird that Hollywood hasn't really done, or not even Hollywood, but any kind of media has done a cuckoldry in a sense that I can at least recall. But what I do recall is there's an actor who is often the other man or the man who's being cheated on. But I realize it's like they're using cuckoldry not in the incorrect sense. That's just infidelity. It's not necessarily the act of cuckoldry. One, you don't get the sense that this character is enjoying the sense of cuckoldry, even if it was like ironic or like sexually enjoying it, despite whatever. The point is, like, they're talking about cuckoldry in a way that's not even accurate. So I think it gives people outside of the community a wrong sense of what cuckoldry is. Oh, cuckoldry is just when somebody cheats on someone. It's like, no, you're giving people a wrong sense of what cuckoldry, even if that's not what the article's about, even if it's just about like, here's all the 5 times this actor was, cuckolded, or essentially. It's like, but it's not that. You're just talking about someone cheating on the actor or whatever. Just this actor being the unfortunate position of being the man cheated on in all 5 movies or whatever. But yeah, I think that's why like this, like why I wanted to especially talk to you about this topic, because in lieu of the Cuckold podcast, like I'd like to help other fetishes get the same exposure and time to talk about it. And I know you're not a monolith. You're not the only person who has an opinion or a perspective or a way to take any of these fetishes, but it is in some ways all we can do to, in lieu of like scientific studies or whatever. All that can be done is to talk to people and help get the story out of what these fetishes are and how people enjoy them. So that's really the goal. But I really appreciated everything you said about just about the future of the fetish. I think that is very true, that things will start to open up, and definitely my hope that things will start to open up and people will get to express all kinds of things that maybe they didn't even feel comfortable for. Like maybe it's accessible, but not quite accessible enough for them, like marijuana in some ways. Like
Right.
it was legal, but you had to get it from a dealer or whatever, or like it's medically legal, you have to get a card. And then once it became more legal in certain areas, people were just like, oh yeah, I can go buy that.
and I could just go buy that at a store or whatever, a regular weed store. We are coming to the end. Unfortunately, this has been a amazing talk, but I don't want to finish before letting people know where they can find your stories and your art, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am on Fur Affinity. That's furaffinity.net. And if you go on there, I have an account under Drewby Fox. If you search that, it'll come up. However, most of my stuff is explicit content, so you would need to have an account before you're able to read any of my stories. Otherwise, I'm on. You can see all the art that I've commissioned on Twitter, and that is under @DrewbyFoxAD.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us on, or anything else you'd like to add before I wrap us up?
No, just thanks for having me on, man, and thank you so much for what you do. I was very excited to find this podcast. I had searched for quite a bit for one that does exactly what yours does, and that's just talking honestly about the fetish from perspectives of people who have the fetish. And I can't tell you the amount of content that I blew through. I mean, fetish podcasts specifically talking about sex, and they'll have an episode on on proctophilia, and it's just offensive. I mean, just one dimensional the way they talk about them. Clearly, they hadn't even spoken to someone who could account for the fetish. And I think it's brilliant listening to the episodes and listening to your guests and hearing real people. It makes a difference.
I agree. And I thank you for that. And yeah, thank you especially to all the guests, especially to you, Drewby, for coming on and really enlightening us, enlightening me on a lot of these kinks and fetishes I only know of in name. And you really gave me a perspective, and I'm sure you've given other people a perspective as well. And I think it'll be really helpful to a broad segment of the audience. So I thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben.